Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Hundreds of people waited in line at the Alberta-Montana border as the United States reopened its land borders to Canada. Today is National Indigenous Veterans Day, and a number of prominent Canadians spoke out about what this day means for our country. And Amazon Web Services announces a new $4.3 billion initiative for Alberta, which will create close to 1,000 jobs. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. After nearly 2 years of waiting, many people lined up to get back into the United States as the Biden administration reopened its borders with Canada to fully vaccinated Canadians on Monday. Some have been waiting in a nearby Alberta campground 18 kilometers from the Coots border crossing for a number of weeks.
They said they've been waiting to go back to the U.S. for 2 years, and they're not going to miss out. The one over there on Site 3 has been here since, I can't remember what day he came. But anyway, he was here for 18 days by the time he goes over the border. The one in 24 came, and he is here for 17 days.
I quit the military maybe 3 months ago, and I just had to spend some time alone, and Canada was open, so I came here. I've been here for, 27 days soon? I'm going from here to Montana. I have a friend I'm meeting up with. And then I'm just going from Montana through Idaho and up towards, is that Washington? To return to Vancouver when my trip is over. I'll get up early. I don't have much to do other than just, hike around, see the sights. So I'm not shy of getting up early and going down to the border at all. But I'm expecting a lot of people to be down there.
Well, I usually come down through this border crossing because it's probably the easiest one because it's a major highway. It's open 24 hours. If you look at Saskatchewan, all the border crossings are basically about 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll be up probably about 5 in the morning and whenever I leave here.
So you don't feel like you have to be the first one to breathe American air?
Oh, I won't be. I bet there'll be people lined up there at midnight. I'll bet you on that right now.
Yeah.
Well, anticipation turned into elation as the U.S. opened its land border to Canadians once again. BCN's Naveen Day was at the Coots border crossing earlier on Monday and says the lineups began as early as 2 o'clock in the morning.
I'm standing 7 kilometers away from the U.S. border crossing. It is an estimated 3-hour wait before reaching customs. But according to the people in line, they don't mind the wait. They're just excited to finally head south.
Heading off to Moab, Utah, going down to do some base jump and parachute activities. First time border's been open in 20 months, so stoked to drive down there. Got one trip in this summer flying down, but now, finally getting to drive across the border. It's pretty exciting.
Well, it's great. We don't have to fly. At least we can drive down.
Last year we flew down, and then a friend drove our car down, and we drove back. And so this year we just waited till it opened and then went to drive. We need a car down there. It's too expensive to rent.
The opening is not only exciting for travelers, but also for businesses located near the border. Dan Court runs a bed and breakfast with his wife in Warner. He says she was overwhelmed with calls once the border opening was announced.
Monday morning at 9 o'clock, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, at 9 o'clock in the morning, they announced that the border would be open to Canadians going across at 9 o'clock. By 9:15, we were booked out, and she didn't have time to get a hold of Airbnb and Booking.com and all of them to tell them we were booked out, so we were totally swamped.
A very important stipulation to entering the U.S. is the requirement to show proof of full vaccination. Travel agent Tracy Hamilton gives us more details on what vaccines the U.S. recognizes.
So the Moderna, the Pfizer, they weren't big on AstraZeneca, but I know people who've had AstraZeneca and had no problems at all. And then, of course, the Johnson & Johnson. So any of the ones that they are approved or have approved in the US, we're using them, so we're good on that.
Hamilton adds that you will not be required to provide a negative COVID test to enter the US, but you will need to have one upon returning to Canada. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Now, with the United States lifting border restrictions, it has not only impacted Canadian travelers, but also those from Mexico, Europe, and India, setting the stage for emotional reunions.
All the flights from India were restricted. Because of travel restriction, I could not see her. But finally, she made it here, and we'll have a good time.
I can't even explain in my words how happy I'm. I'm on cloud 9, I can say. So here we are together.
How does that song go? Reunited and it feels so good. Well, the start of the work week felt pretty good as well, as we've been above seasonal high for this time of year. Jeanette Rocher is in with a quick look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, will the warmer temperatures be sticking around?
Well, Hal, it appears that they will be. You know, our seasonal average right now is 6 degrees. We did reach a high of 9 degrees today. Into tomorrow, Tuesday, we are looking at a high of 8 degrees. Really, we're only going to see the temperature drop to about 3 later on this week before jumping back up into the double digits, possibly even the teens. I will have all of those details for you coming up later on in the show.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Today marks National Indigenous Veterans Day. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh marked the occasion at the National Aboriginal Veterans Monument in downtown Ottawa. Thousands of Indigenous veterans fought for Canada, with many returning from the wars, facing discrimination and lost rights despite their service.
We want to acknowledge the sacrifice, the contributions of Indigenous men and women who served in the Canadian Armed Forces, who served and contributed in Canadian Armed Forces throughout the history of this country. We also want to acknowledge the injustice faced by Indigenous people, by Métis, Inuit, and First Nations. The fact that many who served our country in their service came home to have lost their status. That's an injustice that we have to acknowledge, we have to recognize. We also want to acknowledge the contribution of Indigenous veterans in our commitments to move forward. That in remembering the lives lost, we have to commit to building a better future.
A Lethbridge veteran has created a bilingual poster of the poem In Flanders Fields. It was a way to pay homage to National Indigenous Veterans Day. The poem was translated into Blackfoot, and there are warrior symbols on the poster that hold a significant meaning for the Blackfoot people.
Print here consists of the poems in Flanders Field, both English and French, and in the smaller portion underneath the Blackfoot, again to help educate those who are learning Blackfoot, is the English translation. But the focus is on the Blackfoot language. These are symbols used uniquely by warriors. And Chief Mountain is a very sacred mountain to the Blood Tribe. And so all this combined helps to educate and promote remembrance and the warriors' contributions to the Canadian Forces.
You can view the poem spoken in the language of the Blackfoot people by Dr. Lena Russell on YouTube. A Blackfoot Confederacy flag raising took place Monday at Chinook High School here in Lethbridge. As Micah Quinn explains now, Indigenous speakers spoke about the importance of the flag and what we can do as we work towards reconciliation.
Students from Chinook High School and members of the community gathered to watch the raising of a new Blackfoot Confederacy flag. The flag was constructed by Blackfoot elders, and the main picture you see adorning the flag is of a medicine wheel.
It's broken up into 4 sort of quadrants, so the 4 tribes within that make up current Blackfoot Confederacy are Siksika, which is east of Calgary, Piikani, which is near west of Fort Macleod, Skapi Piikani is in Browning, Montana, and Gana, which is the Blood Tribe.
Big Head says back when she was going to school, it was normal for Indigenous students to experience racism. Now a lot of young Indigenous students are speaking out.
Our young people are not putting up with it, and that's why I really encourage the young people here within Chinook High School to not be afraid to speak up when they know something is just not right.
The vice principal of Chinook High School, Dwayne Piper, says it was necessary for the school to raise the flag.
This is a part of many things that we're doing at Chinook High School every single day for the forward momentum of reconciliation. And so if the kids can see this flag as they walk in the doors every morning after the buses drop them off, it's just a great way for them to start that journey every day.
The Blackfoot Confederacy flag will fly at Chinook High School for all students to look up at and think about reconciliation. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Southern Alberta Art Gallery has a new executive director. The new boss is Su Ying Strang. On its website, SAG also say they're looking for community members interested in joining its board of directors. Officials at the gallery say they support the work of contemporary artists who challenge boundaries. They promote public engagement and awareness through artistic expression. The work of the Southern Alberta Art Gallery extends to local, national, and international communities. Wayne King is a retired colonel with the Canadian Armed Forces. He joined us recently on Bridge City News to discuss the many challenges soldiers face during war times and how sometimes war is necessary.
War is never a pleasant thing, nor never a desired thing to be involved in because of the tremendous costs, both in terms of human sacrifice as well as financial. But occasionally, when situations arise such as that setting off the Second World War, it becomes necessary to defend one's freedoms and so on with armed force. And in that context, the nation must be ready to respond to those challenges.
Make sure you catch the full interview with retired Armed Forces Colonel Wayne King and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Bill Beaton was one of the first veterans to move into Veterans House when it opened back in February. Built through a combination of government grants and private fundraising, the 40-unit building in Ottawa is one of the first of its kind. It offers housing and services to veterans most at risk of homelessness.
I have a home again. There's that to start with, right? But I don't have to worry about meeting my rent. I'm on old age pension now, right? So I can afford the rent because I'm unsubsidized. Right, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. It means I can eat again, right? I've lived, like I said, in so many different places, right? And this is the first building I've moved into where everybody's always interacting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, it's like almost being back in the barracks again.
Interesting.
Right? Even though we all have our own apartment, right? You see somebody just knocked on my door,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People are always interacting here, whether it's downstairs around the barbecue area or out in the smoking area or out in the garden, or right. There's always 3, 4, 5 people always together, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that to me is really good because you got the pure counseling kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because some of the guys, they do have problems, right? So it's nice for them to be able to talk, right? To somebody else that's not a professional, right? That's not going to judge them.
When it comes to today's military, most people would agree that the United States is one of the most powerful armed forces in the world. Well, our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says China apparently has the largest maritime force on the planet right now, boasting 355 vessels.
China is marching on, and China is growing its might. And they've made it known to us that they're not only looking to grow economically, but they're looking to grow and expand their influence in the region. They're building their military, their cyber military, and of course their navy being #1 right now. So this is, of course, very alarming. This is something that the West should pay attention to, should unite on, and not allow this to go any further. We know what China's agenda is. They're not shy about putting it out there. We have to decide what we want to do about it and how we're going to combat that.
Lisa Daftari will also discuss how U.S. President Joe Biden's popularity is plummeting. She'll have details coming up after business news. Amazon Web Services announced that it will be making a multi-billion-dollar investment on a new cloud computing operation in Calgary. Officials say it is estimated to create close to 1,000 new jobs through the $4.3 billion investment. Premier Jason Kenney says it's one of the biggest single investments in the history of Alberta's tech sector. He says this is an incredible opportunity for our young people.
But all of this builds on this province's most important natural resource, which is its people. The most highly educated and youngest population in the country, with a low cost of living, low taxes and regulations, an incredibly high quality of life, and I also want to salute the organizations that are going out there and working with investors like AWS, particularly Invest Alberta, and in this case, Calgary Economic Development, for their good work. So once again, to Amazon Web Services, we are so grateful for your confidence in Albertans, in your decision to make this huge investment in the future of our economy, of our tech and innovation sector. And I know that all Albertans look forward to being partners with you to ensure your success, and that will be our success as well.
The new facility should be open by the year 2023. The province announced that more Albertans will have access to round-the-clock support if they're experiencing domestic violence. The Domestic Abuse Response Team has expanded to serve 23 more communities after receiving a $2.6 million grant extension from the government. The program was originally started at the Red Deer Regional Hospital Centre in 2017. It helps patients get quick access to services such as housing, legal aid, and counseling when they're faced with domestic violence. Calgary police say they arrested one man and issued 17 tickets after a protest against vaccine requirements for air travel took place at the city's international airport on Sunday. Officers say around 50 people participated in the rally that was meant to disrupt traffic as part of a Canada-wide protest at airports. Police say many protesters were unlawfully impeding traffic around the airport. 38-year-old Christopher Sakoshia, who was identified as the primary organizer, was arrested and charged with mischief. Around 1,000 people attended a freedom rally in downtown Edmonton over the weekend. Organizers then led around 200 to 300 protesters on a march through the city's downtown core. Many were protesting restrictions and forced COVID-19 vaccines in relation to their employment. Those who attended said another freedom rally will take place November 20th, beginning at 12 noon at the Alberta Legislature Bandshell. They said if you'd like to attend, you can check out more details on the Facebook group page called Alberta for Liberty. The BC government and the Canadian Red Cross are giving housing support to residents who were impacted by wildfires this year. The Public Safety Ministry says the province will provide eligible households $1,300 per month starting next month while they move to long-term housing. It says the financial help will meet temporary housing needs of households that have been receiving a short-term accommodation support since July. The Canadian Red Cross is also helping out with housing repair, reconstruction, and cleanup. Following a weekend vote at the Saskatchewan Party's AGM, where members gave Premier Scott Moe's leadership a solid endorsement, the opposition leader called out the party for being culpable for the province's handling of the pandemic. NDP leader Ryan Miley says the vote shows the problem is not just Moe, but the entire party. He says the cabinet and MLAs did nothing as Moe led Saskatchewan into the worst fourth wave in the country. More than 80% of delegates backed the Premier during Saturday's leadership review vote. Well, we had another mild day here in southwestern Alberta as we got close to double-digit temperatures once again. But will that trend continue? We'll find out shortly with a complete look at our weather forecast. We were slightly higher than normal for this time of year, which isn't too bad, which is around 6 degrees. Jeanette Roche is back with a full look at the weather forecast. So Jeanette, a nice start to the work and school week with the mild temperatures, but will they be sticking around?
Yeah, true. They should be sticking around. Overnight tonight, we could be seeing a few clouds with an overnight low this evening of -5. That seems really chilly. We are going to be experiencing wind chill as well tomorrow morning, but the temperature is going to climb up to 8 degrees. We're still experiencing some wind gusts as well from the southeast, gusting to 50 kilometers per hour. So that will be happening this evening into tomorrow as well. As we look to Wednesday, mix of sun and cloud, high of 6 degrees. Then we are going to drop to that 3 degrees, which is basically the only day this week below seasonal average. So not too bad considering we're in November. That'll climb back up to 8 on Friday, possibly the double digits, even into the teens by Saturday with a high of 13, 8 degrees on a Sunday. So we are kind of seeing that trend of seasonal average a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower. Average high for this time of year, 6 degrees, -6 the average low. 22 was where we were at back in 2004. And we were at a chilly -26 in 1945. Sun rose this morning at 7:32 a.m., sunset at 4:58 p.m. So we're seeing quite a bit difference in those times with that time change over the weekend. Still about 9.5 hours of daylight though. Chance of rain. We're looking at showers tomorrow on the west coast in both Victoria and Vancouver. Both of those cities also sitting at 9 degrees tomorrow. High of 3 tomorrow in Edmonton with wind gusts to 50 kilometers per hour. Wind gusts to 40 in Calgary with a high of 4 degrees. Going to be a little bit windy also in the rest of the prairie. Saskatchewan seeing wind gusts up to 40, up to 60 in Regina tomorrow. But the highs there, 6 degrees in Saskatchewan, 8 in Regina, 7 degrees degrees the high in Winnipeg with sunshine and some light winds in the afternoon. As we look to the central part of the country, Toronto seeing showers tomorrow, 14 degrees the high, 13 the high in Ottawa, and 14 also in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. As we're looking to the east coast, we're going to be seeing fog in a lot of Atlantic Canada tomorrow, mainly dissipating though in the morning. That applies to Fredericton, all of these cities basically seeing fog in the morning, but a high of 14 in Fredericton and Halifax tomorrow. Sunny skies tomorrow with a high of 13 in Charlottetown. St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow sitting at 9 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud and some gusty winds up to 40K. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Amazon says it is opening a second cloud computing server hub in Canada as it is seeing growing interest in the service from a wide variety of sectors. Amazon Web Services says the new hub will be in the Calgary region to better provide service to Western Canada in 2023, joining its first hub in the Montreal area. The company would not say how many Amazon employees will work directly at the new server cluster, but government officials say the project will bring close to 1,000 new jobs. Amazon says it plans to invest $21 billion by the year 2037 in both existing infrastructure and the new Alberta facility. Rogers Communications says it will not appeal a BC Supreme Court ruling that upheld Edward Rogers' reconstituted board of directors. The son of the company's founder used his authority as head of the family trust, which holds 97.5% of voting shares, to replace several board members after he was ousted as chair. His new board then re-elected him to its helm. Edward Rogers' mother and two sisters, who were also board members, opposed the move, saying they went against the company's governance practices. Freshii announced that it says it is beginning the largest multi-unit franchise agreement in the company's history. It says it has signed a deal with Level Hospitality to open 20 new restaurants in Texas over 6 years with a focus on Austin and Houston. Company officials say the deal will strengthen Freshii's foothold in the southern U.S. and expand consumer exposure and access to the brand. Freshii's COO, Adam Corin, says Level Hospitality has quick service restaurant experience, a passion for the Freshii brand, and a deep knowledge of the Texas market. Tesla shares dropped 2.3% after its CEO Elon Musk said he would sell 10% of his holdings in the electric car maker based on the results of a poll he conducted on Twitter over the weekend. That would net him more than $20 billion. Industry analysts say Musk owns around 23% of Tesla stock and is around $10 billion in taxes coming due to stock options next summer. Much of Musk's wealth is held in shares of Tesla, which does not pay him a cash salary. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 100 points on the day to 21,557. The Dow was up 104 points to 36,432. The S&P 500 was up 4 points to 4702, and the Nasdaq was up 10 points on the day to 15,982. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 91 cents to 82.18 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to 5.41 US. Gold was up 9 cents to 18.2427 US an ounce, and silver was even at 24.46 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.84 per bushel, barley's at $9.47, canola's at $22, and corn is at $9.95 per bushel. Live cattle were up 30 cents to 132.10, feeder cattle were down 30 cents to 158.58, and lean hogs were down 18 cents to 76.38. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 80.37 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Biden administration reopened its Canadian borders today to fully vaccinated Canadians. Hundreds of snowbirds camped out at RV campgrounds near Coots and Milk River, waiting for the opportunity to fly south for the winter or to drive south. This is the first time Canadians have been allowed to cross by land for non-essential travel since March of 2020. There have been a number of bomb threats at some of the top Ivy League schools in the United States. American correspondent Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment. 3 major Ivy League schools in the United States received bomb threats over the weekend. Officials at Cornell, Columbia, and Brown universities ordered partial campus evacuations following the threats. To discuss this in more detail is American journalist and one of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari, joining once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, has anyone claimed responsibility? Were the bomb threats connected? And really, what do we know at this point?
Yeah, so they turned out to be nothing, but obviously you can't take a bomb threat lightly. It turned out that they were all around the same time Sunday evening at the universities. They evacuated partially in certain areas of the campus. They wanted to obviously be very vigilant of these threats. And there was a similar threat made at Yale University Friday afternoon. So they're thinking that because of the style of the threat, these are all connected. Thankfully, they turned out to be nothing, but obviously this is a serious matter. And they're trying to really pinpoint the root of it and where this threat comes from and to prevent it from happening again at future universities.
Yeah, you got to take that seriously, absolutely. Now, Lisa, the Biden administration is reportedly thinking of shutting down yet another oil pipeline, this one in Michigan. And it's drawing criticism not only from north of the border here in Canada, especially in Alberta, when we're all about oil and gas here for the most part, but also with many of his opponents as well. A lot of people are not happy about the potential of another pipeline being shut down.
Yeah, if you remember how this was a major issue during the campaign, and President Biden, then candidate Biden, came out and said, I got you. This is not something that's going to happen. And it's happening. And it's happening in swing states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and other places where this is an issue. The energy secretary from the Biden administration went on CNN this weekend to say, listen, heating prices will go up this winter regardless. It's going to be an unprecedented high. So don't worry. It's not as if this is going to be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. So don't worry about this particular pipeline being shut down. That's not what people want to hear. This is not what constituents want to hear. This is not what opponents want to hear. And I think it's going to really show in the polls. If you look at the polls of approval polls, President Biden is under 40%. Kamala Harris is under 30%. And again, these are repeated from different left, right, center polling, companies and groups and outlets, media outlets. So, it's people are upset. Look, you vote on your life, on your job, on your, the ease of getting basic goods. When you go to the gas pump, you feel it. You want to get basic goods, you feel it. You want to do construction on your home, you feel it. And now this is going to be jobs. This is people's livelihood. So it's really a serious matter. And I think a lot of people are voicing that.
Let's talk about Biden's approval rating, like you said, dropping to a new low below 40%, actually at 38% right now. Is it safe to say that maybe the honeymoon is over in the United States? Outside of, let's say, canceling oil pipelines, what else do you think is contributing to the low approval rating? Maybe the vaccine rollouts?
Yeah, a lot of things. And I think it's very soon, early on, to have this honeymoon phase be over, right? Look, President Biden didn't have to do much to get elected. He didn't come out to say much. He was hiding in his basement for most of the time. He was all about being safe about the pandemic. And even now, he doesn't do many press briefings. He tries to stay off the mic. His team doesn't want him to do, ad lib, Q&A with journalists. So, it's the actions, right? So it's when people go again to the gas pumps. It's when people are, paying taxes. It's when people have a hard time when they go to the grocery store and they see the inflation prices and they see how basic goods cost multiple times what they were costing before. We look at the ports and how many containers of goods are lining up to come inside to the country. We're looking at all these things, including what's happening in Afghanistan, including what's happening at our schools, more importantly, the mandates. January 4th coming up, a lot of companies are coming under the gun. If you have over 100 employees, you have to, instate this vaccine mandate, which is to be vaccinated, show proof of vaccination rather, or show a weekly test. And a lot of employees are going to choose medical freedom over their jobs. And that's a very sad choice to have to make, to even be pressured to make that choice, especially in this economy. So it's a mess. And there are a lot of jobs, by the way, but not too many people who want to work. So the stimulus after the pandemic and, the people don't want to go back to work. It's created very chaotic society here. So of course it's showing in the polls.
Lisa, Iran's military launched an exercise near the Gulf recently, a few weeks before the U.S. and Tehran resumed talks to potentially revive the 2015 nuclear deal. Now, this will no doubt heighten tensions between the two countries.
Yeah, you'd think, right, Hal? But who knows if it really will. There have been so many provocations from the Iranian regime, flexing their muscles. Talk about, trying to sweeten the deal before you sit down at the negotiating table. Try to be kinder, try to be nicer, try to at least put on a fake facade of kindness or of, a softer facade, right? And that's the difference right now. So if we rewind back to the Obama administration when they were trying to get into the Iran nuclear, you had a President Rouhani in Iran who was that wolf in sheep's clothing. At least he came out to say, flowery rhetoric, and now they want to change and they want to work with the international community, and they got a deal. Now, Iran is under a very hardline president, President Raisi, who is actually going full force and saying, this is who we are. We're going to double down on who we are. We're going to enrich uranium to an unprecedented level. We are going to do our military drills. We're going to flex our muscles, and you're going to sit down at the table and you're going to get back into the Obama era JCPOA, and you're going to like it. And that's the tone that we're hearing out of Tehran. But again, let's see if it actually makes a difference. Up to now, the presence of all of this chest thumping has been, really inconvenient for the Biden administration, who is really jonesing to get back into this deal. So let's see if it ultimately allows them to sit down and get back into a deal, or if it will really be that setback that we think it ought to be.
Now let's also talk about that brazen drone attack on the home of Iraq's prime minister. Lisa, the attack marked more escalation between Iraq and Iran as Iran-backed militant groups are attempting to overturn last month's election.
Right. So this is the Iranian regime exerting its influence in Iraq. This was an assassination attempt on the prime minister. It was near his home. It was near the front of his home. Many of his guards were injured. He actually suffered some minor injuries as well. Look, if this were actually to be a successful attempt, it would be the Iranian regime assassinating a prime minister to fully take over the country. Now, we know that Iran's regime has its claws in Iraq. We know that the United States went in there 20 years ago to make a difference. We brought down Saddam Hussein. We wanted to, instate some real nation-building differences that would allow the Iraqi people to really determine their own future. And instead, we paved the way for the Iranian regime to come in. We served it up on a silver platter. We let them come in, and these insurgencies now not only have a place in government, they want the whole thing. And this assassination attempt really underscores the appetite that the Iranian regime has in Iraq and what the consequences may be.
Morocco is apparently interested in purchasing Israel's Iron Dome in order to defend against aerial threats. Now, according to the Jerusalem Post, it's a deal that's unlikely to be signed anytime soon.
Yeah, well, that's the company that was interviewed for that part of it, where it's not going to be signed anytime soon, is a naysayer, because obviously on the ground in Morocco, there is some pushback as to why Morocco's government got into the Abraham Accords with Israel, obviously normalizing relations with that country with a list of other countries. And the announcement that Morocco is actually interested in the Iron Dome technology is actually a sign that the Abraham Accords are alive and well, and they are making significant changes in the Middle East. Not just a piece of paper, but real economic exchange, tourism, and more. And of course, as you know, the Iron Dome is a technological system that protects Israel and now perhaps Morocco with a technology, and we've actually brought some of it to the United States here. It is a laser shield that protects against missiles and such. So Morocco needs this against the terrorist insurgencies that have begun to attack it from Algeria for years now, and they've voiced interest. This is not anything new. Obviously, the countries that have signed on to the Abraham Accords, they understand the technological advances that Israel does have, the apps, the phones, the hospital and medical technologies that they have, and they want a piece of that. And why not? Why shouldn't the Middle East advance with peace, prosperity, and economic development? And that's exactly what we're seeing here.
State media in North Korea says that country has been conducting artillery firing exercises to bolster its defense capability. Lisa, many observers say it's Pyongyang's attempt to pressure Washington and Seoul to abandon what it calls their hostile policy.
Yeah, so much for their nuclear diplomacy in Washington. This is North Korea's way of getting our attention, is to conduct more drills. Going back to the story about the drills of the Iranian regime is conducting, look at what's happening all across the map. When there is not a strong voice coming out of Washington, D.C., the enemies will chest them. They will try to get our attention by showing their might. And you can talk about China or North Korea or the Iranian regime or any other country trying to really establish its power, its motivation, what it wants for the future by doing these drills. And that's exactly what this is. It's a visual. It is an announcement, right? If it's only symbolic, it's quite significant to say that the North Koreans are saying, this is what we're doing, and this is what we will continue to do. And, we're not hearing anything out of Washington with regards to North Korea. And that's perhaps because we are so insular right now, looking at the crises inside the country, that we're failing on our foreign policy here. And we're actually failing to have a tone, at least, for foreign policy that lets our enemies know that we will not tolerate this behavior.
Any talk of a potential meeting between North Korea's Kim and Joe Biden?
I think there's such a rift, right? The last time we heard anything at the podium about North Korea, it was to use nuclear diplomacy. And I remember this term being, it's funny to my ears, because when you look at a rogue nation like North Korea, again, or like the Iranian regime, you have to throw diplomacy out the window or take it with a grain of salt. Look at who you're dealing with, look at your opponent, and deal with them in the way that you should deal with them. Of course, there should be diplomacy. Diplomacy should be part of any, strategic plan foreign policy. But when you look at the North Koreans, when they're conducting these drills, when they're making announcements every day about, furthering their nuclear program or furthering the way that they behave in the region, then you know that you have to take a different position. And I thought, Donald Trump actually made a good start at this, because he started one way and said, you know what, let's do this the nice way. And then when he saw that the North Koreans weren't looking to concede, they weren't looking to compromise, then he pivoted a bit. It didn't get anywhere. We don't know if there would have been a second term where that would have gone. Perhaps it would have worked or not. But again, the point being that we have to pivot our position when we look at our opponent and look at how they are behaving vis-a-vis the crisis at hand.
Lisa, when it comes to military might, and in particular on the high seas, one would always associate that with the United States and the United States military. But the Chinese Navy is now apparently the largest maritime force on the planet, boasting a total of 355 vessels. Now, that's according to a recent report by the U.S. Defense Department. Should we in North America be concerned about this?
We actually dedicated a very big portion of our website this morning to this story at the Foreign Desk, because it is, it's like, pay attention, everyone pay attention. It's like, while we are so insular and looking at, of course, expecting that the United States would be number one. And while we are dealing with all of the pandemic and the economic crisis, and we're looking inside to ourselves, China is marching on, and China is growing its might. And they've made it known to us that they're not only looking to grow economically, but they're looking to grow and expand their influence in the region. They're building their military, their cyber military, and of course, their Navy being number one right now. So this is, of course, very alarming. This is something that the West should pay attention to, should unite on, and not allow this to go any further. We know what China's agenda is. They're not shy about putting it out there, but we have to decide what we want to do about it and how we're going to combat that.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
Remembrance Day, lest we forget, it's a time to remember the many sacrifices paid by our soldiers to allow us to enjoy the freedoms we have today. It's also a time to review how our society and government treats veterans and their families. Joining me now is Wayne King. He is a retired Canadian Forces colonel and service officer for the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Wayne, so great to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Wayne, when did you first enlist in the armed forces, and what motivated you to get involved?
I enlisted in 1959 in the Royal Canadian Air Force, straight from high school, and I had always had great interest in the Air Force and the work that the Air Force did on behalf of whatever action was ongoing.
Okay, we talked a little bit off camera. And what were some of the things that you did? You actually have been to some of these countries, but you were more involved in taking some of the soldiers over, right?
Yes, that's quite right. Initially, I started out as a training officer, and then later on flew with the Air Defense Command in Bagotville, Quebec, and following that staff tour in Ottawa, then I switched to transport, C-130s, and in that particular role, I flew a number of missions, both search and rescue, but also worldwide logistical support, Middle East, Far East, South America, as well as Africa. So it was really a worldwide role. Yes, it was a great experience. I also flew the C-141 Starlifter with the United States Air Force out of Charleston. And that, again, a worldwide logistical support role.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And of course, when we think of military, oftentimes we think of war. War is never pleasant, but some believe that it's necessary at times, of course. So can you talk about the importance of fighting for freedom?
Well, the history of the world, certainly the history of Canada, shows the immense involvement of the citizens of the country and the sacrifice that those individuals gave in defense of freedom. You're quite right. War is never a pleasant thing, nor never a desired thing to be involved in because of the tremendous costs, both in terms of human sacrifice as well as financial. But occasionally, when situations arise such as that setting off the Second World War, it becomes necessary to defend one's freedoms and so on with armed force. And in that context, the nation must be ready to respond to those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a challenge it is. Now, this is the 100th anniversary of the poppy. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that or share a little bit of the history of the poppy? It's such an important symbol of Remembrance Day.
It is. The history of the poppy itself starts in about 1919, following the cessation of hostilities in World War I. And it started in France, but within a very, very short period of time, in fact, about 2 years, the use of the poppy as a symbol of honoring and recognizing the sacrifices of those who served spread worldwide and was also adopted here in Canada. And it is now 100 years that since that symbol has been utilized in Canada. And it is one that we at the Royal Canadian Legion want to honor, and we would like to see everyone wearing a poppy, such as yourself and the poppy I have on my tunic. But it's a symbol that does recognize the sacrifice and the contribution of our armed forces and those first responders, police, and other first responders.
Absolutely.
To the maintenance of our freedoms.
Yes, very important. Now, you mentioned how important it is to wear the poppy. So how do you think that we're doing this year compared to other years when it comes to the number of people in Lethbridge, say, and other areas actually wearing poppies? Are the numbers going up or down? What do you think? What are you seeing?
I think right now, of course, we're going through a very difficult period with COVID-19. And it's rather difficult to judge with any precision whether the number of citizens out there are actually wearing the poppy compared to other years. But I do know that in normal years, the poppy organizations, the poppy group within the Legion here in Lethbridge, usually obtain tens of thousands of the poppies, which we like to see given out to the citizens of our country. This year, we obtained 55,000 of the poppies, and we'd like to see all of those distributed and worn. I haven't seen much change in the way or in the numbers of people wearing the poppy from prior years, but that might be because of the effects of COVID-19.
I know the pandemic seems to have an effect on everything, doesn't it? No matter what it is.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Wayne, how well are we doing with younger generations remembering? Do we need to do more to help our kids appreciate the sacrifices made from our freedoms? I know it's hard when you think of young kids remembering, because really they're not remembering, they're just kind of more honoring or thinking about it. How do you think we're doing with that?
Well, we can always do better. I think we're doing all right, but you're quite right in that the younger generation, if they want to learn about armed forces and learn a bit about what caused Second World War, for example, and what happened during that, they really have to go into what for them is very much a history book. For the older generations, those memories are more personal.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a very different criteria when we're dealing with the youth. But it is important that we make sure the youth understand the critical importance that the older generations made in terms of defending our freedoms and preserving our way of life, not only here in Canada, but throughout the democratic nations of the world.
Now, speaking of youth, there was a 14-year-old in Chestermere, Alberta, that came up with this idea of having the city paint poppies on the crosswalk that leads to the cenotaph. But apparently it stirred up a little bit of controversy when the Canadian Legion responded that it would be disrespectful if people stepped on the poppies. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you're right. It was a bit of a controversy, and I must thank that 14-year-old youth who thought of the idea. I do not personally view the fact that the poppies were painted on a crosswalk and people walked on them as they crossed the road as a indication of disrespect either for the veteran or the poppy. I think anything that increases awareness of the role that the veteran played in our society and the critical importance of maintaining that remembrance and maintaining the support for the veteran is good for our nation and good for the veteran community.
Definitely.
So I don't agree with the criticisms leveled at that particular move. I think it was a good move, and I certainly believe that a majority of the veterans in our community would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it sounded like a great idea, and it's a great way to, kind of have that visual reminder too, like you were saying. So when people buy a poppy to support veterans, where does the money go, Wayne?
Well, first of all, just by way of correction, no one can buy a poppy. Poppies are not for sale. We freely give them to anybody who wishes to have them, and we certainly advocate that they do so and wear the poppy proudly. The contributions, the donations that are generated as a consequence are put into a trust fund and are used in direct support of the veterans whenever a veteran runs into particular short-term problems, such as health problems, which might cause them to lose employment or fall behind in their utility payments, that type of thing. So the poppy funds help in that regard. They also are used to support veterans who might be residents in our various care homes around the city. There are quite a number of them, and we have well over 100 veterans in residence in those facilities. And the poppy fund is used to obtain necessary support equipment for the veterans who are there when that particular facility doesn't have the means of acquiring them. So it's used in a variety of ways, and but is very critical in terms of maintaining the help necessary for the veteran.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning helps for veterans. So what kinds of needs and challenges are these older veterans facing right now?
It's a variety of problems that they face. Some of it arises directly out of the fact that they served, in many cases, in combat zones. I would venture to say that even though it's not necessarily readily apparent, such as the loss of a limb, but mentally, veterans who come back from areas like Afghanistan and so on often find that they have elements of PTSD, post-traumatic impact, from what they have witnessed, what they have undergone while they're in theater. And that sort of thing can be very, very debilitating. It causes difficulties in the home, difficulties in the individual veteran's life, his ability to acquire and maintain employment and support his family, as would normally be the case. And some of the work that we do provides direct, ongoing support for those suffering PTSD. And it's not only true of the veteran who is in a theater of conflict, it's also true of many of our other veteran communities, such as the RCMP, who spent decades involved in strife. They might have been injured during investigation of a traffic accident or domestic dispute, that type of thing. And so the RCMP is very definitely part of our veteran community.
Definitely, and I think people sometimes forget about that, to think about those first responders. I understand that another major complaint of, it's very common among veterans to feel that the length of time that it takes to get disability benefit decisions from Veterans Affairs Canada, it can be a challenge. Has that improved any?
Well, it's certainly an ongoing problem. It hasn't been resolved in any marked degree so far. Similarly, though, I don't believe it has gotten worse lately. It's a situation that I hope the government continues to spend a good deal of time and effort trying to resolve, so that the veteran who comes forward and substantiates a disability as a result of service can, within a reasonable time frame, expect some support, which is part of the program. If it is delayed too long, then the veteran understandably gives up hope that he is going to get the support that he is entitled to as a consequence of having served our country in a theater of conflict. I sincerely hope that the improvement continues, because it is critical to the welfare of the veteran community.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we have all these sad stories kind of about veterans, kind of the challenges that they face. But what would you say to a young person watching right now who might be considering a career in the armed forces? What would you say? Like, it's a chance to see the world?
Well, I would say to that individual that a chance to join the forces, if they are so inclined, is an opportunity for service to our country, service to our community. I wouldn't key it to the fact that you might see the world and so on. You can do that as an individual, just as well as having joined the military for that purpose. The purpose of joining the armed forces is to react or act on the feeling that you wish to serve your community, serve your country. And that really, to me, is the principal motivating action. I would suggest, however, certainly in my case, if I were a younger individual, I would certainly join up again. I would do it all over again without any hesitation. It's been good for me, and ultimately, I think it would be good for those who do join.
Amazing. Wayne King, retired Canadian Forces Colonel and Service Officer with the Lethbridge Royal Canadian Legion. Thanks so much for joining me today. Appreciated having you on.
You're very welcome. Yep, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.